Well, so this video is actually going to be a walkthrough of how to identify sentence types when you're given a sentence. And so part of the assumption is if you're watching this video, you already have maybe watched my videos where I talk about what's a simple sentence, what's a compound sentence, what's a complex sentence, and what's a compound complex sentence, because I will talk about these sentences with the terminology that I've already explained in those videos. So you should hopefully have a working knowledge of those so that as I go through these sentence types, as I talk about these sentences, we're on the same page. So I would look in the same playlist and look at those and review those videos if you have not already, especially if I start talking and you get a little lost as to some of the things that I'm saying. Also, a reminder, there's two reasons why you should know these, well, more than two probably. But oftentimes colleges will have placement exams for English and for math, and those tests often have a section where it asks you what kind of sentence is this. So you should be able to identify a sentence type when you're reading something. For one, because all sentences, when an author picks a sentence, they are effective in one way or another. Or if you choose the wrong sentence type for what you're trying to do as an author, it could be ineffective. Now, as a writer, however, you should be aware that you need to have sentence variety in your writing. And one of the ways to do that is to understand the components of a sentence and the different structures that you can choose. Plus, if you want to make a point quickly, or like a punchy point where you're like, you don't want anyone to misconstrue, you would choose one sentence type. If you want to unpack something and keep the reader's attention on one idea, you would choose a different sentence type. So there's great reason to know these, both as a reader and as a writer. And so as we get into these, I found these are just example sentences I found on the internet, and I'm going to go through them and decode them with you so that you can see how do I now take the knowledge of what's a simple, what's a compound, what's a complex, what's a compound complex, and I start to decode sentences in order to do that. All right, so let's look at this one first. When I get home from school, I'm going to take a nap. So the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find the most simple, rudimentary, basic sentence in anything that you're reading, a subject and a predicate, or a subject and a verb. And so when we look at this, right, we can see I get and I'm going. So right now already we have two subjects and predicates. I get home from school, I'm going to take a nap, and they're separated from a comma. And so this one, I'm going to take a nap, is a subject, verb, and then you have a prepositional phrase to take a nap. So this is a simple sentence right here. Here you have I get home from school, subject, verb, predicate. From school is a prepositional phrase. So you have a simple sentence here, but remember the word when is a subordinating conjunction. So whereas I'm going to take a nap is a independent clause, the word when in front of this simple sentence makes this a dependent clause. So you have a dependent clause plus an independent clause. That makes a complex sentence. So number one, the answer to one is complex for those reasons. Complex, okay? Because it's a dependent clause plus an independent clause. And remember, the rules with these is this can go to the end as well. You could simply say, I'm going to take a nap when I get home from school. In that case, there would be no comma after nap, but when you bring the dependent clause to the beginning of the sentence, you have to have a comma here, grammatically speaking. The second one, I got in trouble, so I can't go to the party, but it would have been fun. So again, let's go to the basic, where are my subject-verb combinations? I got, subject-verb. I can't go to the party. All right. It would have. So there's three subject verbs. So in this case, this actually needs a comma here. I got in trouble, simple sentence. comma, conjunction, so I can't go to the party. Here's another simple sentence, but the comma conjunction makes it a compound sentence, right? Comma, conjunction, but it would have is another simple sentence. So there are no dependent clauses in here. It's just simple sentence, simple sentence, simple sentence. So this simply is a compound sentence because it has three simple sentences. Remember, a compound sentence is a simple plus a simple, and then you can just add additional simple sentences on that. But the key to decoding this was, number one, I identified one subject verb, two subject verbs, three subject verbs. And so I know I have at least a compound. And then I start looking at, well, what's happening in each of these? Is there a subordinating conjunction that would make one of these three simple sentences into a dependent clause? Because that's a game changer from a compound to a compound complex. Okay, so that's what that one is. Next one. Being alone can be scary unless you keep yourself busy. All right, so again, what are my subject and verbs here? Now here's what's interesting. Being alone is a concept. That's a noun. So this is a subject, can be is a predicate or verb predicate. So being alone can be scary, right? That's a standalone sentence. It's a simple sentence. You have a subject and a verb, can be, and then an adjective, scary. Then you have you keep, subject verb, yourself busy. You keep yourself busy. That's a simple sentence as well. So what you have here is your subordinating conjunction. Except where in this case, in example number one, the subordinating conjunction was at the beginning. In this case, the subordinating conjunction is at the end. So this one is also a complex, but it is an independent clause plus a dependent clause, which underscores the point I made that when the dependent clause is at the end, there's no comma. Now, if I had taken unless you keep yourself busy and I put it at the beginning, then I would need the comma. So hopefully you're catching that. Number 4, Mr. Morton, the best reading teacher in the world, taught me sentence structure. Now this one is a little tricky. There's something that's meant to kind of throw you off here, I suppose. So you have the subject, Mr. Morton, and you have the verb taught. You have and then you have the indirect object me, and what he taught me was sentence structure. So you only have one subject and verb here. And so the question becomes, well, what's this thing offset by commas? Well, this is actually what's called an appositive. It is a description of Mr. Morton, and it's actually not essential to the sentence. So it's called a non-essential clause, and it's also called an appositive. It's the same thing here in this case. In other words, if I got rid of this, the sentence still makes sense. All right, but I'm not going to get rid of it because it's part of the sentence. So you really only have a subject and a positive for the subject, which is another name for Mr. Morton, a description. No subject verb here, right? There's no other verb. And then you have the one verb taught. So in that case, this is a simple sentence. Okay? So it's a subject plus an appositive, right? Plus a predicate. So a predicate, again, is the verb phrase of the sentence. It can have the verb plus prepositional phrases plus other things like that, appositives and whatnot. All right, other clauses, that kind of thing. Next one, Keith, Carrie, and Kyle. And here you have your subject, right? But it's a compound subject because there's 3 people there. What did they do? Number 1, they bought. There's one verb. And here's another verb, and ate. But what is missing here is another subject. So you have a compound subject, and then you have a compound verb, bought and ate. Because it's a compound verb, right? There's number 1, there's no comma. And number 2, it keeps it a simple sentence. Them is the description of the donuts, and then down by the river is a prepositional phrase. And in this case, so this is a simple sentence as well. Because how many subject-verb combinations are there together? There are simply one subject. It's a compound subject. These three people. And there's one compound verb. Because here, there's no subject between them. Now, how would that, let's say I put they here. That changes everything. The comma would then be called, grammatically, the comma would be demanded because you have a simple sentence. These three bought donuts. And then you have another simple sentence. They ate them down by the river. The presence of this noun changes the sentence type and the structure. It makes the requirement of a comma, and it changes it from a simple to a compound. So no comma, no subject there. That's a simple sentence. Next one. I left early so that I could get some work done, but I'll be back soon. Let's go back to our basic. How many subject-verb combinations? I left, 1. I could, 2. I'll be back, right? I'll be, 3. All right, now we go back to, well, what's happening here? Here is a comma conjunction, so this would make a compound. Here is a so that. That's a subordinating conjunction. So that means that I left early is a simple sentence. I could get some work done as a simple sentence, but the so that subordinating conjunction makes it a dependent clause. So you have an independent clause plus a dependent clause plus a simple sentence independent clause. And that makes this a compound complex. Why? Because you have a independent clause plus the dependent clause, which is a complex, right there, plus your simple sentence, which is an independent clause, and that makes that a compound complex. Okay. Next one. Crossing the street is dangerous if you don't look both ways before you cross. All right. Crossing the street, this is what gets weird for people, right? That isn't a concept, it's a noun. So there's your subject, verb is with an adjective. You don't, right? Look both ways before you cross. So you cross is a subject verb as well. But before is a subordinating conjunction. Before you cross is a dependent clause. All right. You don't is your independent clause, but the if is a subordinating conjunction. Don't look becomes a dependent clause. So this is your independent clause simple sentence. So this is actually, when we look at this, is an independent clause plus a dependent clause plus a dependent clause, and that equals, right, a complex sentence. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. But again, what goes back to you subject verb, you cross. You don't look, subject verb. Crossing the street, subject is verb. Right? The if subordinating conjunction before subordinating conjunction. Okay? This one. If you don't want to study, you should stay home, but you may regret it. So hopefully you're starting to see this happening, right? You don't, subject verb. You don't want to study is a simple sentence on its own, but already here you have the if dependent subordinating conjunction, making this a dependent clause. But here, notice it's at the front, so there's a comma. So this is the dependent clause. You, subject, should, stay, verb, right? Subject, predicate, simple sentence, independent clause. So right here, dependent clause plus independent clause. This part right here is a complex sentence. But we have a comma conjunction with a simple sentence. Subject, you may regret, verb. And now you have a simple sentence connected with a comma conjunction, making this, hopefully you're seeing it, a compound complex. All right. Hopefully you're seeing all of that. Next one. Every time I go to the mall, I spend all of my money on things that I don't need. Now here's an interesting one. Absolutely. I go, subject verb. I spend, subject verb. I don't, subject verb. So we have 3 subject verbs. Here we have a that. That's your dependent clause. That makes this there's your subordinating conjunction. That makes this a dependent clause, which all of a sudden now we have the trigger. This is at least a complex sentence. I spend all of my money, prepositional phrase, on things, prepositional phrase. So here you have an independent clause, simple sentence. So this right now is a complex sentence. Now what do I got to do with this? I go is a subject verb, to mall. This should be the mall. Every time I go to the mall. There's your subject verb, prepositional phrase, simple sentence. So what is every time functioning as, right? Well, in this case, every time is functioning as a subordinating conjunction, because I can't come up to you and say, every time I go to the mall, and you're waiting for what else I have to say. Yeah, what? Right? That makes it dependent. So in this particular case, it's just shuffled around. A dependent clause plus an independent clause, simple sentence, plus a dependent clause, and therefore it is, and you could say it's a compound dependent clause, I suppose. It is a complex sentence. All right, next one. Fix this a little bit. All right, next one. Mom said that I can go to the museum with you, but I have to be home early. Let's try this again. Mom, subject, said, verb. I, subject, can go, verb. I, subject, have to be, verb. Right, so we have 3. Now we got to decode that. Once again, I have to be home early. That's your subject, verb, predicate, simple sentence, comma, conjunction. So depending on what's happening before, this is a compound sentence at the least. Then we have I can go, and then prepositional phrases after that. That's a simple sentence, but the word that is a subordinating conjunction. So this is a dependent clause. Mom said is a very basic sentence. Mom said. So you have your subject verb. So this is your simple sentence. So independent clause, simple sentence, plus dependent clause, plus comma conjunction, simple sentence. So you have a compound, and there's a complex in it. So it's a compound complex. Next one. Okay. Modern Warfare is a fun game, but no game is better than Miss Pac-Man. Okay? Modern Warfare, subject is verb. So there's one unit. No game, subject is verb. Notice that's it. There's no other subject verb. Here we have a comma conjunction between simple sentence 1 and simple sentence 2. So very simple. Simple plus simple is compound sentence right there. Okay? Last one. Todd and Nick, those guys, are eating chips and salsa on a park bench before dinner. They're going to spoil their dinner. So there they are. Todd and Nick, compound subject. Are, eating, is your verb. Then this is what they're eating. This is a prepositional phrase. This is a prepositional phrase. The only subject-verb combo is Todd and Nick are eating. All the rest is direct objects and prepositional phrases. So when you just have a subject-predicate with other stuff happening, but no other subject-verb pairing, That's a simple sentence. All right. So we just went through 12 examples and decoded them, putting into practice the lessons from the videos on simple, compound, complex, and compound, complex. So hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you're starting to see these patterns emerge and have a better grasp of how to start not only decoding sentences as you read them, because we want to think through why does an author choose to use particular sentences, because when we turn around and we become the writer, we understand that simple sentences have a role and a place. So do compound, complex. They all have a role and a reason why you would choose to use them. All right, until next time. Well, hey, if this is your first experience with this channel, I want to let you know that there's a lot of information here that could be very helpful. I would love it if you'd subscribe to the channel right here. This is going to be a playlist of other things that have to do with writing, whether it's sentence construction, sentence types, that kind of thing. Also annotating, rhetorical triangle, all of that kind of stuff. This might be a playlist that has to do with rhetorical devices, other things AP related that might be of use for you, and then maybe some samples of the books that I have read. I have a lot of audiobooks of different typical classroom kind of novels. Also, I have some analysis videos of books like 1984. So lots here, as well as some fun stuff because, life is no more than just books. It's fun too. All right. Thanks a lot.